I'm actually a little bit surprised that you are expecting me to take the floor. I was rather preparing to take part in discussions, but thank you for the opportunity. And let me briefly make a statement about using new data from the National Registry. It has already been mentioned that in 2020, the first stage of the national stock-taking exercise of Russian forests was completed, and it provided information which is unique, both in terms of its quantity and its quality. And it can also be used to support our assessments of carbon sequestration. Over 69,000 test sites were used, and we have 117 indicators taken or measurements made there in each of these sites. Most of them will be relevant for carbon sequestration calculations. Now, it can be done directly with the usage of existing models and conversion coefficients available. Well, the national methodology of forest stocktaking actually, does make provisions for how you should do it, but only for 2 out of 4 pools. This is the biomass pool, alive and dead, above ground and underground. However, there is no provision for the soil pool, nor is there a similar pool for the bedding, or for the forest litter, rather. This, however, would only be the first stage for our calculations. Precise, reliable data on carbon sequestration can only be obtained up to the end of the second cycle of second stage, of the stock-taking exercise. And it's only going to happen in 10 years' time if everything goes according to the plan. And the first stock-taking exercise took us like 13 years, and we cannot really afford to wait for 10 years. Well, the National Registry of GHG emissions is to be updated and reported on every year, which means that first stage data will be used going forward. We can actually develop growth models, particularly for the main varieties of trees, on the basis, obviously, of the first stage measurements. And this will give us an assessment of the real carbon capture happening. So these permanent test sites, 70,000 in number, can get us there. Now, we all remember the baseline. The base here is 1990. Now, this test data will be associated, I guess, with 2020. But the rest, will need to be recalculated. We'll need a retrospective model that will tell us retrospectively how carbon sequestration changed between 1990 and 2020, and this may be quite challenging. And still, this data will not get as far in terms of assessing carbon emissions. Well, in the forests, most of these emissions are related to fires and forest cutting. Well, currently, this data is sort of manually calculated.
Распоряжение, которое подписано министром природных ресурсов, предписывает использовать.
And the decree signed in force by the minister of the environment states that we need to calculate annual losses. If we follow the letter of this decree, we'll need to get data for forests for every year.
Проходит достаточно такая активная дискуссия по поводу того, насколько
There is a heated discussion happening currently about how much we should trust regulators' data on forest fires. Because data coming from different regulators differs substantially. Rosleskhos, Russian forestry regulator, shows numbers which are like 30 or 40 times, not percent, times different from what you get if you simply study satellite imagery.
Вот, необходимо подчеркнуть, что послепожарная ситуация достаточно сложно определяется даже при наземном обследовании. Далеко не всегда можно достоверно сказать.
The problem is that a survey you conduct after a fire, even on site, even in situ, can be quite challenging. 1, 2, sometimes even 3 years after the fire, it's impossible to say if a particular tree is dead forever or not. And remote sensing data, therefore, should also be taken with a pinch of salt. I mean, verifiability of remote sensing data on the basis only of a handful of sites where you check it is dubious. Rosleskhos has data on the actual volume of forest filled. And this data somehow is not taken into account at the moment. It would make sense, actually, to use this data compared to our, well, shall I say, model calculations. How much time do I have, by the way? You still have a bit more time. Okay. Now, if we are talking about the opportunities presented by the first stage, I should also mention that besides using this data for direct quantitative assessments of accumulated carbon and carbon sequestration, this data can also be used to further verify remote sensing data. Well, because all the test sites, we know a lot about them, I think this will give us unique opportunities for verification of remote sensing data. It would be a great project, I think, and we are hoping that collaboration with the Institute of Space Research and other institutes of Russian Academy of Sciences would see it the same way. I think this should be it. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm happy to take questions if you have them. Thank you, Andrei.